Europe invented the science behind RNA breakthroughs. So why are our companies fleeing to scale elsewhere?
Only 12% of the investment in RNA globally last year came to Europe. An RNA company in Europe is getting 1/10 of the investment that its North American counterpart would get.
The numbers tell a brutal story, but the real killer isn't just money, it's the maze we've built ourselves.
Europe is a set of countries with different cultures, different barriers, everything's different. So when you want to sell from one country to another, we created a hell to do business across Europe instead of a heaven.
Yet the fix isn't complex, it's right in front of us.
There is a fast track to whatever is biocontrol, and that fast track will allow companies to open the file within the next 3 months, not 5 years.
Because we've been here before and paid the price.
We invented GSM, in France, by the way. And guess what? A few years later, we pay 15% royalties to Qualcomm and now to Chinese. Does it make any sense?
This time, we can choose differently.
So we have great R&D, we have cheaper workforce, so we can scale those companies in Europe. So we don't want to lose them. We can scale them here. We need to keep them on board.
How do we stop the exodus and keep RNA innovation where it belongs? Join us for an urgent conversation with Jean Schmitt from Jolt Capital and Rob Blackie from Crampton Blackie as they reveal what's silently pushing Europe's world-class RNA innovators to scale everywhere except Europe, and the concrete steps that could change everything.
Before we start the show, a quick note. If you're building or running a fund, you know it takes the right partners. At EUVC, we only work with sponsors we truly believe should be part of your tech stack. Please do take a moment to hear about them. And if you do, reach out, mention EUVC. It's the best way you can support what we do. Thank you so much. Starting off, HSBC Innovation Banking. If you're a founder, a scale-up, or a VC, you need a bank that actually understands your world. HSBC Innovation Banking backs innovation globally, from seed to IPO. And if you ask me, a strong banking partner like HSBC belongs in your stack. If your portfolio companies are scaling, they need infrastructure that won't slow them down. Google Cloud Starter Program offers $2,000 to $350,000 in credits, plus technical support to build better and faster. It's a key boost every fund should bring into their ecosystem, and oh my God, are we thankful to be partnering with them. Now, legal is a space you cannot lag on. Legal needs to move at the speed of venture. Goodwin's team has decades of experience with startups and funds. They're trusted at every stage from formation to exit. Goodwin definitely is a legal partner every serious manager should have in their stack. For Luxembourg-based VC, PE, and fund-of-fund managers, modern funds means going digital. Fundcraft gives you a full-service, digital native platform built for today's European managers. It's a must-have if you're scaling smart. So we all hear about the Middle East. How about you go there? From AI to deep tech to sovereign fund, SkyTech in Dubai is where global future of tech gets negotiated. It's not just a conference, it's where East meets West, capital meets innovation, and the bold set the agenda. If you're playing on the global stage, join us going to SkyTech this year. If you're gearing up for your next fundraise and want a placement agent who truly understands emerging managers, reach out to C Funds. They're a boutique placement agency that has helped GPs across Europe raise capital from top-tier LPs. We've been on the other side of the table here. They are actually good ones to work with. So I do urge you to go to cfunds.io to go and check them out. And hey, before you go, if you're looking to discover startups, raise capital, or connect with innovation leaders, do check out dealflow.eu, the EU-backed platform bridging founders, VCs, and corporates. There's no better place to find the startups that have received significant funding from the European innovation ecosystem.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back to another UVC episode. We hope you know by now that this is the go-to place for connecting and championing European venture. Today, we have an episode where we're zeroing in on a topic that sits right at the crossroads of science, tech, and sovereignty, which is RNA. Our mission, as you know, is to make European venture stronger, more globally competitive, and more independent. And few fields better illustrate both the promise and peril of our ecosystem than RNA, which I am looking forward to dive into because I'm doing a a small gathering, an unconference for people in TechBio here in June. So I'm looking forward to dive into this. Joining us today are the authors of the landmark report State of RNA in Europe 2025, Jean Schmitt from Jolt Capital and Rob Crampton from Crampton Blackie. Together, they've mapped the company's patents, funding gaps, and policy hurdles defining Europe's RNA trajectory. So I am trying to buckle up here. I hope you'll do the same. And now I'll turn the mic over to Rob and Sean to tell us a bit about themselves, as well as take us into the report.
Okay, so Jean, I'm running an investment firm, Jolt Capital, which is investing in growth stage companies in deep tech across Europe. And of course, RNA is among the different domains we're exploring, even if we don't do biotech. So surprisingly, we don't do biotech, and we're interested in RNA just because there are many applications in synthetic biology, which are within our scope of investments. So we are very interested about that domain, and that's the reason why we were excited to explore that domain with Rob. And I will explain how we digged into the domain and how we found a kind of a great set of data, which is explaining the dynamic of the market and what we can expect or not in Europe from RNA.
Hi, I'm Rob Blackie. I'm from Crampton Blackie, one of the founders of it. We help innovators to explain what they do to investors, because often people who are deep global experts in something like RNA find it very complicated to explain what they do to an investor, to simplify it for the investor. And we've worked with a number of RNA companies, including Greenlight Biosciences, who we helped to IPO as a unicorn in 2022. So we were involved in the report because often we are working with those RNA companies on exactly their struggle of raising enough capital to be successful.
With that introduction, let's get right into it. First and foremost, why do you think it's worthwhile at this time to do a report on the state of RNA in Europe?
RNA is potentially an incredibly powerful technology. We've seen it with the COVID vaccines. They were a critical part to ending the pandemic. But also we've potentially seen it for things like treating cancer, genetic illnesses, and actually creating more environmental pesticides to work in agriculture that get around many of the problems of traditional pesticides. So it's potentially an incredibly powerful industry for Europe. And it's an industry where many of the global leaders are from Europe, and a lot of researchers come from Europe. So I think the big question for us was, is the industry being as successful as it could be? And if it's not, what can we do to make it more successful?
Yeah, it's RNA, just to, because I want to look like a nerd a little bit here. So, it's this ribonucleic acid, which is RNA. This is a molecule which is completely central in any living body. So living being human beings, animals, plants, but whatever is alive is using, in various cellular processes, is using RNA. So that's what is exciting. It's all over the place, and it is something we can exploit in a proper way. And there are many discoveries going on still, but we already know that you have this very famous mRNA, which everybody talked about for good or bad, hated and loved it and whatever. But mRNA had been something which had been around for a while, underused, and we all understood now that the market potential, the benefits for human beings were huge and completely underexploited for no good reason. So now, what about tRNA, or what about rRNA? What about other type of regulatory RNA? So there are plenty of ways to use RNA, and then you have the applications in different vaccines, as you discussed, in interference for doing other things by using synthetic RNA, and it's a vibrant domain in which we cannot not participate because it is in the middle of whatever is alive. So, and the applications are huge. So we will discuss that.
Some would say that this is a classic case of the invent here, scale elsewhere syndrome. So we're lacking in commercialization in Europe. Do you agree with this perspective? Is this part of your core push when doing this report, that this is truly where we need to increase our focus and our capability?
We invented a lot here, and we do have an incredible research in those domains. Our issue in Europe had never been to invent. We had been extremely good at inventing in all domains. As a growth capital in deep tech investors, we see plenty of incredible inventions. Our issue is not there. Europe is not one country. Europe is a set of countries with different cultures, different barriers, everything is different. So when you want to sell from one country to another, and we will talk about regulation, even if we have a European level regulation, we still have a per country regulation as well. So we created a hell to do business across Europe instead of a heaven. So bottom line, we keep inventing because we have fantastic research, but we give it away to people who have countries with critical mass and less barriers. And here, China, USA, soon India, those guys have very large markets in which a company can thrive without having to deal with a complicated fragmentation. If you look at our playbook, we developed this playbook on how to create a global company from Europe compared to how to create a large company from the US. In the US, you stay in the US, you ignore Europe, and you can become very big already. In Europe, if you're born in a European country, your playbook is very different. You need to grow a little bit in your small country, France, Germany, whatever, even smaller ones. And then you grow with the neighboring countries. Then you need to go to Asia first in order to get big enough. And when you are big enough, you go only selling your product to the US. Otherwise, you end up selling yourself to the US. So the playbook is different. And the discipline you need to develop is a much higher level of discipline than what you would have to do for developing the same company in the US. The research is not the issue. The issue is the playbook on how to go from pure research to a large company, being in a very small country, which is the country you're born in, and in a fragmentation place which is Europe. And many other places have the same issue, by the way. You go to Japan, you go to Korea, you go to Canada, it's even worse because they don't have Europe. They have just themselves. So those guys look at one country which managed that in a special way, which is Israel. Israel, you start in Israel, you sell to the US. This is a business model. It's frustrating, but it is what it is.
Before we go into the playbook and the later stages, so to say, of the company development and the issues / opportunities that are there, let's just talk a bit about and double click on the science and the IP landscape. So if we talk about the raw assets, what does the European RNA company landscape look like in terms of numbers and focus areas?
What we found in research was over 750 RNA companies in Europe. So there's a lot of companies in Europe. It's about just under 1/3 of the global total. And they are issuing or hold about 1/4 of the global patents. So they're major players. And this is an expertise that is all across Europe. There is some level of RNA expertise in almost every European country. I think what's interesting, though, is that one of the things that is helping a little bit it is possible to get bigger, particularly from Western Europe, because there are these big research hubs in Western Europe in particular. We also see that particularly in Paris, which I think has 5 of the leading academic research hubs in Europe. And on startups, and I think this will be a familiar story to many people who know about European technology, Britain has tended to be the startup hub of Europe. And I think it was a bit of a surprise for us for RNA, because traditionally Britain hasn't been seen as an RNA leader quite so much as Germany or France. But actually it appears that maybe some of the French entrepreneurs are going up the Eurostar to form their companies. In fact, if we look at the Eurostar as a corridor, there's an extraordinary number of successful RNA companies in or close to the Eurostar route. Places like Cologne and Utrecht, Namur, Charleroi, Brighton, as well as the obvious bigger cities like Amsterdam, Brussels, London, and Paris. And so I think that's one of the things that Europe is helping with. It is easier for people to move around Europe. I would also say, I think it's quite interesting that London has really become such a huge startup hub for Europe. In Britain, everything is very centralized in London for startups. While in Germany, where there are a very large number of startups, they are spread much more evenly across the country, with no one particular area dominating. So I think there's quite a vibrant research industry, but also startup industry for RNA. I think the challenge they face is that commercialization challenge. And some of the really interesting research that was pulled out by Jolt was that only 12% of the investment in RNA globally last year came to Europe. And that really affects the companies, because it means that in the early stages after a company is formed, an RNA company in Europe is getting 1/10 of the investment that its North American counterparts would get. And that obviously slows down the rate at which they can commercialize and be successful. And one of the implications of that we can see is that among the top patents for RNA, Europe is holding fewer and fewer of them. So in 2010, it was around 20%. Today, it's closer to 10%. So the proportion of those top patents that are really going to change the world held by Europeans is falling over time. And that is fairly obviously a result of not enough investment.
Just perhaps giving a few words about where this data is coming from, because, over the last 10 years, we put together this engine called Jolt Ninja, which is an AI engine crunching the web day and night, discovering companies or something like at a pace of one new company discovered on the web per minute. And this system is an AI engine investigating on each company, on the IP, the relationship with investors, the people, the relationship with large corporates, and so on. So that database now is like 5 million companies which had been analyzed and which had been cleaned up. So when you ask about RNA, you can classify the different applications of an RNA and find companies. So what we have as data here is very reliable. I think it is the largest database you would ever see in technology companies today. Here, the idea we had with our friends was to put that together and kind of have a picture of RNA. So the dynamics you see here is actually pretty clear, pretty sure as well, confirmed by other sources as well. And it is shocking to see that Europe, not only Europe, is not seeing the opportunity in terms of funding. And here, if you see that on that graph, you see that Asia is actually growing very fast in proportion of what is backed. And Europe is shrinking from 2014 to 2023. Our proportion of deals and an amount of money investing is decreasing, which is problematic. And as you underlined it, it's not a question of research centers. It's really a question of trust in research. So why that is something which we need to address at a point.
Could you tell me a bit about the sectors in which you have seen the main activity happen in RNA? If we think both about what we're seeing globally and then where we're seeing European hallmarks of strength?
When you look overall in RNA, you have different types of applications. Some are very obvious. Of course, most of the applications are in healthcare and biopharma. So it's a building block of life. So, and you are very concerned about our bodies. So clearly, and you are very concerned about how to address our cells and especially when you look at cancer, this is starting there. So you really are very concerned about therapeutics, vaccines, diagnosis a little bit less. And one domain which is important is mechanism of delivery. So how to deliver a drug exploiting RNA. So this represents probably 80% of the whole projects on RNA. Now, there is one domain which we forget all the time, but which is very big, which is agriculture. It's not big enough, but it's quite big. So agriculture, here you are looking about all sorts of bioregulation, biopesticide, eventually genetic improvements. But, this is not very popular, but biopesticide should be much more popular. Typically, you would change it for some types of algae, and in order to give them some specific properties where they would express some specific new molecules which you need. It's a crop protection as well. So those applications are massive and they have massive implications as well. And here there is little investment done in those domains today, but there are massive implications. And we can probably explain also the why those non-massive one. The last one, chemistry, is much, much, much smaller because this is reserved for very large industries. But we can call that synthetic biology. You want to create, engineer some novel biological circuits and systems, sensors. You can do things which are very special with synthetic RNA. So those domains are very special in synthetic biology. But agriculture would be a very large domain. Healthcare and biopharma would be 80% of the entire business.
Just to chip in on agriculture, one of the good things about agriculture is it is much cheaper to develop a product in agriculture than in human-facing biotech, because it's actually relatively cheap to make agricultural grade RNA. So it's much, much simpler to do the testing than it would be for human-facing things. And the technology is absolutely fascinating. The first product of agricultural RNA was released by Greenlight Biosciences just over a year ago. And it protects potatoes from the Colorado potato beetle, which if you're a potato farmer is the biggest problem you have. And it does this in a really clever way. It targets a gene that only exists in the Colorado potato beetle. So any other creature could consume this and it would have no impact. But in the Colorado potato beetle, it basically creates a form of terminal constipation. So really the beetle feels a bit unwell and it stops eating, and that interrupts its breeding cycle. And that means you don't have as many potatoes or potato plants eaten by the beetle. And this is a phenomenal technology compared to traditional pesticides because it only affects the target insect. So most traditional pesticides, you spray them on a field and they're carpet bombing the field and they're killing all the insects in the field, even all the good insects that you want to exist. This only affects that target insect, and it also then breaks down in the environment in a few days. And that's because RNA is everywhere in nature. If you put a bit of RNA on a table or anywhere in the world, instantly bacteria are going to get to work eating it because everything eats RNA. And so those two things put together make it a very interesting piece of technology for improving things. Now, the first product was approved in America for Colorado potato beetle just over a year and a half ago. Ukraine has also approved it as well because they obviously have a very big potato industry. And the second product that is coming along protects bees from a parasite that kills them. So if you have a beehive in your garden, often the most common thing that would kill the honeybees is something called the Varroa destructor mite. And the RNA is now being used as a medicine to protect those bees.
The question we can ask ourselves, and we discussed that multiple times with Rob, is, hey, how don't we have much, much more industries around RNA for agriculture since it works so well? And it works in so many applications. And of course, very targeted means that we don't have collateral damages, as you mentioned. So the reason is that we are killing ourselves in Europe on regulation. So here we are completely stupid. It takes around 7 to 10 years to get a product approved. And I mean, any product for agriculture would be treated the same. Would you have the worst pesticide coming from the worst chemical plants, or the most natural pesticide, which would be there for the last 2,000 years, and you just decide to reuse the same one? It's the same. To get approval, just for someone to open the file, it's already 4 to 5 years. So you drop your file in a country, any country in Europe, it takes between 4 and 6 years for having someone turning the first page of your file. Then they start asking questions and doing back and forth and so on. And since then, you have no right to do any business, of course, so not to mention even tests in large fields. And you are in an industry, especially in agriculture, where cycles, say, are a year because there is a season for everything. So not only people are not working reading your file, but on the top of it, if you have a question, it always takes a year to answer because you need to go through a cycle, especially when you are a very small and innovative company. If you're a very large company, you're operating on both on all parts of the world. So at least you can manage to have multiple seasons in a given year, because it was the same season multiple times in a year, because you can travel in the other half of the planet. But in case of startups, everything is going twice as slow. So then, in order to get regulated, it's another 3, 4, 5 years. And if you have a brain and you're in startup, you look at the US, and here, the US is supposed to be the guy being the most dirty guy, is absolutely not conscious about environment and so on. Yeah, but for biocontrol, it takes less than 24 months and you're in business. So if you're a startup, you don't do that in Europe. It's a reason why also we don't have investments. We created an environment where for investors, it's unacceptable.
Can you tell me a bit about the, because this is, of course, one of the areas of critique and the things that we need to solve. Can you tell me a bit about what is causing this? Is it, or do we have the established agriculture industry with us as helpers in this, or are the startups alone in this fight? Where do we see politicians or policymakers make the right moves? Are there specific countries we should look to and we should learn from?
I can give you a few ideas, because of course it would require much more work on the reasons. One of the reasons is, if you are a very large, synthetic pesticide company, you are going to do plenty of formulation of the same product, and you're going to ask for examination by the regulator of all the different formulations. So you are going to swamp the regulator with the same file with different formulations 150 times. So it's not that the regulatory bodies are lazy, they are swamped. And there is no fast track for those products which we all desire, which are the clean products, the biocontrol products. So there is no fast track for those. So you take your ticket on the line like everybody else, and you wait to get approved, being a biopesticide or a synthetic pesticide. And if I'm a synthetic pesticide company, I'm going bio as well. I'm not stupid, but I need time for that. And in order to buy myself time, I'm going to flood the regulator with frivolous demands. So I think that's the
Are we seeing this happen?
Oh yeah, of course. In some countries, I even saw some.
I have to just. You're saying, of course, but it's absolutely terrible. And
yeah,
it is terrible. So then, let me ask you a tough question. I don't know if you've been yourselves active in this publicly, but one of my positions I'm taking in the European ecosystem is, I wish that all of us, especially the investors, that I do think you come from a privileged position oftentimes when discussing things in the media, because we're supporting startups. There's generally a good mood around startup investors. So I wish sometimes that we would get more often and more clearly up on our soapbox and try and get people up in arms about, in this case, big ag blocking good innovation. Have you ever done that? Why are you not doing it? Why are you doing it? How do you work to improve this environment?
Of course, we try hard, and so we are sending our position papers. We are analyzing domains. We are sharing some analysis which we write with some sovereign funds. So we don't do that alone. We do that working with other serious players who are digging into the subject and who are willing to make those lines move. So we do that, of course. It's not like we are crying in our corner saying, oh, people are very nasty, nothing is going to happen. No. We write it down, we analyze it. I can give you another reason, by the way, which is a very complicated reason to address. It is this famous principle of cautionedness, or however it is called, and this principle of being very cautious. So, we prove everything first and then we try. And everybody is like, yeah, we should be very, very cautious. And let me explain you where it takes you at a point. So, for example, we looked at a company which is doing a biocontrol type of product, which if you spread it on fields, after 1 week, everything becomes carbon, water, whatever. So, but nothing is left. It's completely not there anymore. And that's fully proven. Then we have a regulatory body telling us, yeah, but can you prove that it doesn't have long-term effects on people? Say, yeah, after 1 week, there is nothing left. So no long-term effect on people. No, that's not what they ask you. If for 1 year, you have someone, a farmer, going in his field months after months and exposed to that product, would it generate anything months after months? Say, yeah, because after 1 week, there is nothing left. Yeah, but I know, but after a month, there is nothing left either, because after 1 week, there is nothing left. After a month, there is nothing left. Prove it to me. It's like, okay, you have no choice. What do you answer? You answer, guy, you know what, grow a brain? No, you cannot do that, because this guy is going to put the wrong stample on your file, like go to hell. So you need to accept this principle, because it's a part of our life, but it is really dumb.
I don't know if I should name the individual here, so I won't, but there's a person very involved in trying to push for policy changes in Europe on behalf of tech. What he always says to me is, Andreas, I've always been playing by the book. I've always gone there, did my work, did all the analyses, brought everything in the right order. I have never, ever caused problems. And then I see the farmers that that flood the streets with their tractors, and they bring shit in front of the literal shit in front of the embassies and I don't know what. And then he said, why have we not taken a page out of that book in the tech ecosystem? And this is also where my, of course, thinking comes from when I say that I think we do come from a place of pretty high standing, good integrity when we speak up, especially the founders. One thing is the investors, okay, we're the greedy guys, you can always say that, but the founders will always typically be supported in the public media. And I think that the stuff that you're describing here, I would wish that we would be more proactive and lean into taking, and the problem is that when you do so, you get in trouble. Yes, you do.
Yeah, but you know that we do that with our feet. Entrepreneurs are leaving. That's the way they revolt. A farmer cannot decide to take his field and to go in another country. Unfortunately for him, he's stuck on his land. We are sitting on IP. IP travels. This is a disaster I'm seeing as a convinced European and a supportive European. I'm seeing that our IP travels outside of Europe, and we see that in numbers. As convinced as I am about Europe, as willing as I am at investing in that domain, I'm telling the policymakers, guys, do something, because this domain is going to die.
To be more positive, maybe, right now, we also have the opposite opportunity as Europe, which is many people who are entrepreneurs in America would maybe not be very comfortable at the moment with the political situation there. Actually, the rule of law maybe feels a little bit less certain as an entrepreneur in America than it did a few months ago. And I think that's an opportunity for Europe to attract people back, actually.
If we fix our issues. We need to fix ourselves.
Completely.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt you, but this is true in many domains. It's true in drug development. It's true in medical device. I don't know what happened in the head of the guys who did that. Do you know that as European as we are, as civil servant orientated as we are, we decided to give the approval of devices to private companies. So guess what? They serve the large people rather than the small one. Am I surprised? They're private companies. They're here to do profits. So those notified bodies, initially you say, oh, it's a body, so it's okay. It's a body. It's not a company. No, it's not a body at all. It's a private company doing profits. When you have, a large US firm coming and telling, I'm going to give you tons of money to approve my 10 medical devices. Or when you have teeny startup coming to help, I have 1 medical device to approve. Can you give me a discount? Which one do you pick? Let me think. And, this is nonsense. And nonsense is very easy to fix. Those notified bodies, they don't even have a service level agreement. You know, you go to FDA in the US. So now with Kennedy blowing up FDA, we might end up being on the same playground again. But right now, you go to FDA. If you ask a question, 3 weeks later, you're a startup or you're a super large corporation, you get an answer from a professional human being. Today in Europe, you ask a question to a notified body, the answer is whenever they want. So we need to fix ourselves here. It's very easy. Service level agreement to notified bodies. I would cancel the notified body stuff, but here I'm going to unplease so many people if I tell that, so I don't tell it. The other part is about, you know, killing some nonsense stuff. For example, going back on crops, we need to be able to experiment in real fields, new technologies when they are proven not to be harmful. And we cannot do that anymore. We used to be able to do that something like 10 years ago. You could have a specific derogation in order to test your new products on some specific fields. And it was under the scrutiny of local authorities and so on. It's not possible anymore.
And I think that's a very good point. We can also learn from other countries about what they do better than us. Whether, you know, the FDA, you know, is one good example. One I heard recently was that DARPA in America did grants for tech startups of $300,000, and the startups would pitch in the morning, and by the end of the day, they would have a signed contract to give them the money. And that is very impressive because it's a bit of the government moving at the speed of a startup. Because speed is the thing that startups need more than anything else. And of course, so much of the regulatory system is built for big companies who can afford to move slowly, rather than startups who need to move fast.
Now, the rest is fine. So we have great R&D, we have cheaper workforce. We in specific RNA related technologies, those are not huge factories. Those are not super complicated, intensive workforces. So we can scale those companies in Europe. So we don't want to lose them. We can scale them here, even regarding energy and consumption and so on. Those are not that hungry technologies, so we can do a lot of things here. So we need to keep them on board. And again, this is true on multiple domains, but especially on those, the industrial aspect of it is real. So it's not only people on a bench; it's actually factories.
I just wanted to round off the segment around regulation, asking you if you were to put forward a wish list or a path to progress when it comes to paving the way for a better regulatory landscape for RNA companies, what are the key steps to take?
There is a fast track to whatever is biocontrol. And that fast track will allow companies to do, so first we would open the file within the next 3 months, not 5 years. So we force ourselves to be very quick at opening those things. So I would put a dedicated team for it. And second point is I would also authorize some testing, plain field testing, under control of some local authorities, but I will allow that so that people can come to the regulation bodies with tests which are already right and done and so on, rather than going to the regulatory body in order to have the authorization to do a test and so on. It takes too much time. So that's what I would do. So just fast track, which worked in so many situations in the past, especially for biocontrol, because we want to be a clean continent. So we need to walk the talk.
I absolutely agree with Jean. And just one thing to add to it is maybe more of an explicit acceptance by regulators of the costs of doing nothing. So if you go to many places in Europe, bird numbers are in decline. Why are they in decline? Well, one of the reasons is that insect numbers are in decline because that's what the birds eat. Why is that? Well, one of the things that causes that is traditional agriculture, where you have pesticides that kill all the insects in a field. Slow regulatory responses to new technologies make that environmental problem worse. And that's because they only think about the risks of the new technology, not the benefits of it and not the costs of the status quo. And I think that's a very important thing for them to take into account, is doing nothing has a cost.
That's pretty good. And I would even ask another layer on the top of it, because your point is excellent. It's telling that people need to, a regulator must be bound by protection of public. This is what they are here for. But protecting people by destroying business is not protecting, because we are all going to end up being naked and very poor. So this is not a great protection. So making sure they protect people, and meanwhile that they give also, they do have an objective in terms of business value creation. So it needs to be both, because otherwise, as you explained it, Rob, doing nothing is the best thing you can do. I'm going to protect you guys. I'm going to do absolutely nothing. You're perfectly protected against innovation. It works. So if you want to have something where innovation is coming in and creating value, the only way is to kind of push regulators to consider the negative aspect, which is the destruction of the environment on one hand, on which they need to be accountable for that, for what they don't do. And at the same time, they need to be accountable for all the business which is leaving the continent. We had that in the telecom world. Look at what happened in telecom. We invented GSM in France, by the way. And guess what? A few years later, we pay 15% royalties to Qualcomm and now to Chinese. Does it make any sense? We destroyed our telecommunication enterprises, Nokia, what's left? Almost nothing. We killed that because of crazy regulation, and we didn't help ourselves here. So breaking up all the telecom operators and turning a very big business into a business that was cut into teeny pieces had been a disaster for Europe. So in our case here, and you keep hearing when you talk to regulators, I hate the businesses I'm regulating. Come on, guys, you should love them, but you should regulate them. In our case, I think we need to have people who are both regulators and business savvy and lover people. It doesn't work to be only a regulator. Like everybody can be an Ayatollah. It's easy.
I think you're making incredibly important points here. I hope that there's someone out there listening that will pick up the mantle. I want to ask you one question, because we started out talking about the existence of more than 250 RNA companies here in Europe. And then you also spoke about the fact that, well, we as founders and investors do actually vote with our feet and we move out of the country. Could you tell me a bit about, if you have any data on that, or just case studies of the exodus of talent, or if we say patents that are invented here but scaled in the States or in Brazil, which is also one of the places where you can get regulatory approval very quick?
I can give you some case studies. Of course, I don't have exactly data about the exodus today. It's very complicated to have this data because it would require to have insider data within the regulator in the US as well. They really created that product, which is extremely effective at replacing, what's called bouillie bordelaise in France, which is this copper oxide, which is killing mildew, so all those mushrooms. And that company has this microalgae, which had been prepared in a special way from a lab, lots of IP around it. It's an extremely simple product. You produce this microalgae, you spread it over fields, and it kills readily the mildew. And copper is a bad beast, because copper, you don't have enough copper left on the planet. We have a lot of use for copper. And on the second thing is that it's corrupting the ground for very, very long time. It's really polluting. Even if it's considered as a biochemical, which I don't know what it means, but it's an extremely dangerous kind of product, this copper oxide. So here we found the perfect replacement. It works. It had been tested. It works. The company started in France. Went to Belgium because it was 1 year faster in Belgium. And then they dropped the glove and said, guys, that's not serious. Let's go to the US. It's 15 months. Some large corporates are helping me to do the move to the US. I'm going to keep my headquarters in France, but I'm going to do all my business in the US. And what's left in France is 10 R&D people. And what's going to happen in the US are large factories, distribution, and the US guys are going to benefit of our research and on their own environment faster than ourselves. Their wine is going to be better than ours.
No, that will never happen.
No, that's
Jean,
never going.
don't say that.
Forget what I said. That's doomsday. That will happen in doomsday. But they are going to use this product on their wine. It's going to save money. It's going to be much better, much cleaner, and so on. Why don't we do that? And by the way, one day this product will come back to Europe, not in 10 years, perhaps, or perhaps never. Because if you are a savvy businessman, you have a large business in the US, then you will go to Chile, to Australia, and you are going to put this anti-mildew thing on all the bad wines in the world, but which is massive in quantity. And why bothering about Bordeaux and Burgundy? So small. So we are killing ourselves. That's a great, simple example, straightforward, well-documented. CEOs is well-known. It's just stupid. And we paid the R&D with business angel money and public payer money.
And another example of that was the COVID vaccines. So the three biggest globally by a long way were the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Now that one was invented and made in Europe, but because AstraZeneca was a very large manufacturing company, it was successful for Europe, but only for a company that was already very big. There was the Moderna vaccine in America, where they invented the vaccine and they made it themselves. So they took all the money for Moderna. And then the BioNTech vaccine, where it was invented by a German team, but obviously then manufactured primarily in America. And that was, I think, was a good example. If that company had had more access to capital a few years earlier, maybe it would have also been able to take the money from manufacturing it as well. So I think it wasn't a failure for Europe at all, this. We did pretty well, but we could have done better. And I think in future, that's an interesting thing for us. Those manufacturing jobs, they're very good jobs in their own right, but they also provided a level of national security. You know, supply chains very nearly broke down during the pandemic. I think maybe with different political leaders, they would have. So we came very, very close to a very serious crisis there.
Gentlemen, we have 6 minutes left, and I want to make sure we do make it to cover what we're all about here on the European VC, which is the capital markets. So let's just talk a little bit about the state of funding for these types of companies, the RNA companies. I'll let whichever of you, Rob, you were about to start before, so maybe you go.
Jean will be far more expert for me. All I will say is, I think looking at our research, the fact the companies at early stages are getting 1/10 of the funding of their North American counterparts is a serious problem. You cannot bootstrap deep tech. You know, if you do a software company, you can bootstrap them. 3 months into the company, you can be generating revenue and getting enough revenue. It makes it easier for you to raise investment, but you can even do most of it yourself. That is just not possible in biotech. You know, these development cycles take years, and they're very expensive technologies. You know, when we used to walk into one of our clients, the joke was every time we looked at something that looked like an espresso machine, it would be some specialized piece of machinery. It would cost $250,000 to work. You cannot do that stuff cheaply. Therefore, you have to raise money, and therefore the amount of money you can raise is critical.
I think that if you are a company in that domain, you are going to feel very alone. The European Union with EIB, EIC, sovereign funds, local sovereign funds are still going to be very active in those domains, but all those funding mechanisms will require some private money as well. So where do you get private money if you want to actually have real money? Corporates. So you are going to find some alliances with either big guys, so like the buyers and the guys who are doing actually synthetic biology and so on. So Mitsui, people like that, if you can get access to those. When you are on the health related businesses, you are going to go to Sanofi, to Novartis, to Novo Nordisk, and so on. And they do have funds which are professional. Now, if you go to private specialized funds, very few VCs are able to go after those domains in a meaningful way. So you are going to have some fantastic firms like my previous firm, Sofinova, or people like Forbion and guys like that. And I probably didn't mention a few very good ones, but you have a handful of professional investors able to go early stage in those companies. And again, it's a question of rabbits and foxes. You know, if you consider startups as rabbits, I don't know why, you would consider that you need a lot of rabbits to see more foxes, and rabbits require basic food to grow, and the regulation is actually doing a terrible and horrible environment for those startups. So venture are much more cautious. When companies do make it, and to go on another thing regarding Europe, when companies do make it regarding early stage and they start being in business, so if by any chance a company is passing this bar of super early stage, and you have a few, I saw companies doing things which are very interesting which manage to get to 20, 30, 40 million in revenue, then you have capital access to people like us. So really late stage, growth stage investors who are going to pay for your next big factory, who are going to allow you to acquire some competitors and play your global playbook. But there are also very few. To give you a statistics at a generic level on funding environment, during the last 15 years, Europe did grow a venture industry in a quite steep way, while the US was mostly stable, and that's stable in compared to their GDP per person. So on the GDP per person in Europe compared to the GDP per person in the US, you would see that we fixed almost our gap in early stage. And of course, it's based on our wealth, which is twice as less than the US. So we pour less money, but we are not as rich. But each person in Europe is now probably devoted the same part of their wealth to startups than in the US. Now, in growth capital, you would see something radically different. The gap is increasing very fast between the US and Europe. US is not growing anymore significantly the VC allocation, but they're increasing very fast the growth allocation, while we grow very slowly our growth allocation. What does that mean? We are pushing an inventory of small companies, and if we don't fund them, we are going to push them down to a cliff. While if we fund them, they will grow. And that's why what the US did during the last 10 years, they fixed their growth industry, private equity industry, in order to create large companies. So we keep asking ourselves, why don't we have so many large companies? Hey, it's because we don't fund the small ones. So it's as simple as that. So in RNA, we have the same issue. Would we have an inventory of small companies which are starting to make it? We wouldn't have enough growth capital to grow them. So we need to fix that as well. I think that programs like ETCI at EIF is working toward fixing issues like that. I think that sovereign funds all across Europe are working on it. I think that pension funds in Europe are absolutely not doing the job. It's actually shocking to see that pension funds in the US are the ones who created the innovation in the US. Starting in the 70s, the allocation of capital by pension funds in the US to early stage and technology created the technology in the US. In Europe, we don't do that, and we need to fix it.
There are no more important long-term stewards than our pension funds. It's impossible to understand why they are not more involved in venture in Europe. I know there are some regulatory hurdles. I know that there are good people working on it in many different countries, but we really have to get moving here. We're actually also doing a small conference get together in Denmark in connection to Tech Barbecue, together with Daniel from Speed Invest, exactly around this issue of how do we get pension funds more involved. It's going to be the next big unlock, I think, if we manage to do it. And we have important work being done by BVC, of course, and Carrie at IQ Capital to unlock the pension funds in the UK at least. So, gentlemen, this was quite the episode. I'm very happy that we made it to take the time and dig into the regulatory side, because I think you really made it to say some important things, Sean, and I really hope that that there will be some people listening in. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It was good being in touch. Talk to you soon.
Before we start the show, a quick note. If you're building or running a fund, you know it takes the right partners. At EUVC, we only work with sponsors we truly believe should be part of your tech stack. Please do take a moment to hear about them. And if you do, reach out, mention EUVC. It's the best way you can support what we do. Thank you so much. Starting off, HSBC Innovation Banking. If you're a founder, a scale-up, or a VC, you need a bank that actually understands your world. HSBC Innovation Banking backs innovation globally, from seed to IPO. And if you ask me, a strong banking partner like HSBC belongs in your stack. If your portfolio companies are scaling, they need infrastructure that won't slow them down. Google Cloud Starter Program offers $2,000 to $350,000 in credits, plus technical support to build better and faster. It's a key boost every fund should bring into their ecosystem, and oh my God, are we thankful to be partnering with them. Now, legal is a space you cannot lag on. Legal needs to move at the speed of venture. Goodwin's team has decades of experience with startups and funds. They're trusted at every stage from formation to exit. Goodwin definitely is a legal partner every serious manager should have in their stack. For Luxembourg-based VC, PE, and fund-of-fund managers, modern funds means going digital. Fundcraft gives you a full-service, digital native platform built for today's European managers. It's a must-have if you're scaling smart. So we all hear about the Middle East. How about you go there? From AI to deep tech to sovereign fund, Skytech in Dubai is where global future of tech gets negotiated. It's not just a conference, it's where East meets West, capital meets innovation, and the bold set the agenda. If you're playing on the global stage, join us going to Skytech this year. If you're gearing up for your next fundraise and want a placement agent who truly understands emerging managers, reach out to C Funds. They're a boutique placement agency that has helped GPs across Europe raise capital from top-tier LPs. We've been on the other side of the table here. They are actually good ones to work with. So I do urge you to go to cfunds.io to go and check them out. And hey, before you go, if you're looking to discover startups, raise capital, connect with innovation leaders, do check out dealflow.eu, the EU-backed platform bridging founders, VCs, and corporates. There's no better place to find the startups that have received significant funding from the European innovation ecosystem.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.